Session of the Kickoff Series for the Social Security and Medicare Workshop with Elaine Floyd. This workshop is coming right up December 5th through the 8th. And if you want to learn more about it or sign up, you can do so with the link that I will share with you in just a moment. Today's kickoff session is titled From Expertise to New Clients, How to Build Your Business with Social Security and Medicare Planning. And I'm going to go ahead and throw things over to the workshop leader and Horsesmouth Director of Retirement and Life Planning, Elaine Floyd. Elaine.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everybody. So I was a financial advisor in the 1980s. I worked for E.F. Hutton, and I had a training colleague who went through training with me, and as soon as we all got licensed and we all went back to our offices, he started giving seminars, monthly seminars, even though he was a brand new broker, didn't really know very much yet, but he knew certainly more than most people out there. And he started giving these seminars, and he would send out these flyers. And they were very simple. They were, 1 hour on just basic financial planning. He was probably one of the first ones to be doing, financial planning seminars in his area. And the thing is, he didn't get a lot of people right away. Sometimes he had like 6 people, sometimes 10, maybe, and then maybe on a good night, 20, maybe 30. Anyway, he never stopped giving these seminars, even though, no matter what. And he became known as the guy who gives seminars, right? And they were educational. People all came and they learned something. And that made such an impression on me. I mean, I also, as a new broker, gave seminars, but not as like religiously as he did. And that's when I realized, because he became so successful. I mean, people, he would just come from all over the place to come to his seminars, and then they would become clients. And so that sort of made an impression on me in terms of the need for financial planning education among the public, and how advisors can really build their business by providing that education. So we've talked earlier about, my coming into Horsesmouth in 2008 and starting the Social Security planning program, and how that subject matter is very relevant to the baby boom generation, and really lends itself to this idea of giving regular, monthly, if you want, seminars, and building your business off of that. Sean Bailey, our editor-in-chief at Horsesmouth, has talked to many financial advisors about, what they have done. Every time we before we went on Zoom, we were doing live workshops, and he would, track people down. He would say, if you ever give seminars, please come talk to me. And he would gather all of this intelligence on how financial advisors were using, client education strategies to build their business. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Sean, happy to see you here. Glad you're here. Welcome.
Good to see you. Thank you.
So let's start by talking about just kind of the general idea. What is the idea? What are the steps? How does it work that a financial advisor schedules a workshop, gets people in the room? How does that translate into business?
Well, I think the first thing to go all the way back to your original story relating to your colleague starting out with his financial planning workshops, even though he really didn't know that much, but he knew more than most, if not all, people in the room. And that's one of the things that's important to keep in mind when you are looking to build your business around Social Security and Medicare. The advisors I've seen who succeed move very quickly into it, even though they recognize that they don't know everything. They go to your workshop and they can be exposed to everything and start that process. And of course, that's why you've had many people return to your workshops, multiple times over the years to keep the skills that they start to learn, they develop, and they incorporate it into, their working knowledge. But it is, some aspects of it are challenging. Here's the thing though. The problem we've seen from time to time is like, well, I want to do educational events, but I I still don't quite understand that WEP GPO stuff. I need to go back and study it before I schedule another event. And what happens is, of course, they never schedule the event. Meanwhile, we've seen advisors over the years who they don't know WEP GPO, they haven't figured it out, but they do know that if they ever asked a question about it and they don't know the answer, they're fine. It's like, that's a particularly complicated question. I don't want to give you the wrong answer to it. We're going to get back to you one-on-one after today's session is over, and then they simply move on. My point is that if you just take on board the idea that you want to be a financial educator, that this is your go-to market strategy of being the go-to person in your community around these retirement topics. Now, today we're talking about Social Security and Medicare, but we also talk in other venues about taxes in retirement, IRA planning, long-term care, Social Security and Medicare. That's kind of the big bundle of retirement topics. And advisors who are just realize that I can build my business. I can add, and we say this, and we've seen it time and time again. If you want to add 5 million, 10 million, 15, 20 million or more in new AUM in the coming year, all you need to do is commit to being a financial educator in your community. And that takes all sorts of different forms, but by putting yourself out there on a regular basis to lead with education as your marketing and your positioning in your community, it just, people achieve those numbers. They do 4 or 6 events and maybe they bring in 5 million. They do 15 events and they bring in 15 million. They do 30 or 40 events, and we've seen people do 30 or 40 events, and they come back with jaw-dropping numbers of 35, 40 million in new AUM. But they do this, they're able to do this because they've created a process. And the process is, as you say, an important aspect of it.
So let's first talk about there's several phases here. One is, getting people into the room, whichever venue or room you might be using there. And then there's the process of converting those attendees into clients. So let's talk about the first part. How do you plan these seminars and how do you get people into the room?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that you want to educate your clients. We know from surveys that clients expect financial advisors to educate them. This is like 80% or more of the public say this is a kind of core skill that they expect from their financial advisor. And it was interesting, leading up to the pandemic, a lot of advisors that we were working with who were putting on Social Security and Medicare events and other events were doing it strictly as a business building opportunity and doing it very successfully. And they were, they'd have their client events, which were more social often. But then the pandemic hit, and these folks who had been building great businesses by putting on, 10, 20 or more events per year, suddenly realized, well, this pandemic, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. Maybe, I'm not sure. But what they did was they decided, hey, you know what? I really haven't been educating my own clients very much. And so they turned to their clients and pivoted, and they started to present on a monthly basis educational events to their clients. And they were contacting their clients and saying, look, we're putting on, listen, people were scared, right? The pandemic was hitting, the market was crashing. People really didn't know how long this was going to go on. And so a number of advisors, contacted their best clients and said, we're going to put on a webinar series over the next couple of months. And we're going to put on 3 events or 4 events. And I just want you to know about it. I want to invite you personally to come to this event. And if you have any friends or family or colleagues who you think might benefit from this webinar on this topic, at that time we were talking about the pandemic and the economy and all that sort of stuff, just let us know and we'll send them a link and invite them too. And so those advisors did that. And you know what? They did that and it worked so well that they continued to do it throughout the pandemic year and had huge, huge referral years where they had been previously killing it, bringing in new clients cold from putting on live in-person events. They pivoted and realized, oh, there's a lot, I forgot, that there is actually a lot of unsurfaced business in the networks of my clients. And by educating them, they were able to bring people in. So another aspect of that is important in the context of what you're saying about what is the process, how do we get people in to these events, is to build your email list. And this is, again, something that people kind of discovered that within their email lists, often when there are 1,000 names or more, excluding your own book of business, that there is a lot of people there who have been following you. And a lot of these advisors became more proactive in their education online with webinars during the pandemic. And they started to hit their list on a regular basis, inviting these people to come in. And what happened again? Boom. People have been following them for years, check in on their webinar, and then at the end of the webinar, they're invited in for a one-on-one, and a lot of people took them up on it. And so they were very successful in that respect too. So it is key to one of the benefits of being a financial educator and putting on events on a regular basis, both for your clients and for a broader public, is that when people register for these events, whether it's in person or a webinar, you're adding names to your list. Okay, they're gonna, people are gonna register. Some are actually going to come. Some won't come because life is busy or whatever, but then they're on your list. Maybe they come to the second event, or maybe they come later on, or maybe they don't surface until, some other big event hits, and what's going on in their own personal lives speaks to what the advisor is educating them on, and then they kind of raise their hand and come in and start that second process. So, I mean, that is just one aspect of, how people have start to get people to come into their events. And now the other aspect is there's a wide range of approaches that people can take. Okay, so we've seen people who are in a very big business development mode, and they've had great success with direct mail. Direct mail, there's a number of vendors nationwide who have kind of specialized in helping fill seats for advisors. Excuse me there.
Okay.
This is real. This is real life.
Yeah, real time, real life.
Hang on, let me close the door. Back again. These mailhouse vendors, have become very, very good at targeting and knowing the demographics in your community. They know, where the sweet spot is, where the good zip codes are. If you're putting on a dinner event, they even know what nights of the week and what locations work the best. And so there are, on one end, there are advisors who are putting on multiple education events. They're spending, nice chunks of marketing money with these vendors, $7,500, $10,000 to market 2 or 3 events at a time to, targeted audiences that the vendor knows are going to respond to retirement topics like Social Security and Medicare. They fill these events up and are very successful that way. Meaning, when I say fill up, like they'll get 25, 30, 40 people at an event. That's one approach. At the other end, there are other people who are like, I'm not looking to, blow the roof off of anything, but I would like a steady stream of new prospects coming in. And maybe they're just doing webinars, and maybe they're just buying some small Facebook ads and using their email list and a couple of other approaches. Sometimes also even direct mail, but not big intensive packages, but maybe they mail to only a couple thousand people and it's just a postcard instead of a big, wedding invitation style dinner event, right? And so they'll do that. They'll spend less. They'll get less attendees. Maybe they get 10 or 15 people. And yet they still succeed because they commit to it on a regular basis. And they find that these topics are really, powerful topics that are pulling people into their events who are, in fact, looking for financial advisors. I mean, that's the one thing we hear about all the time, is that this is the tail end of the baby boom now, what we call the peak 65, right? Those born around 1955 to 1961, 62. That's 21. That group is 21% higher in terms of people in that segment of the boom than it was back in 2008 when we all started it. And so your market is very, very big. And additionally, in the last year, the leading edge Gen Xers are now 55, 56. Any of those mailhouse vendors we were talking about before, whenever they're targeting anybody for a retirement topic, 55 is about the low end that they go for. And the truth of the matter is, people know it in your own business too, there are some Gen Xers out there, like there were boomers who were 55, 56, and we're lucky enough to be ready to start considering retirement. And what's going on is that they're shopping for advisors. They're looking for somebody to be with them in retirement.
And one of the reasons that Social Security is such a powerful education topic is that people then, after they get educated, need their own personal customized analysis. And this, of course, is what our calculators can provide. And so, many of our successful advisors during the workshop or seminar, whatever you call it, will hold up a copy of the report from the calculators and say, if you come and see me, I can give you a completely customized, based on your own benefit amount, your own life expectancy, and husband and wives, coordinate those benefits and tell you, what would be the optimal claiming strategy for you. And so we've gotten questions from advisors who ask, can we charge for these reports? And absolutely, you can charge for the reports. People do. We've heard of advisors charging maybe $250, maybe $500. We've heard other advisors that charge $1,500, but applies it against any, revenues or fees that they charge. So there are a lot of ways you can do it. And that's just why Social Security is such a compelling topic in that regard, because you actually literally get them into your office, you present them something of value, and then at the same time, you're asking them for information. And the other thing that was unique about the broker that I trained with, when he had this whole process, and at the end of each session, he gave everybody an appointment card. And he just kind of assumed, I would, come in and we'll have a personalized, conversation. And he would insist that they bring in tax returns, brokerage statements, insurance policies, everything. And it was, it kept the looky-loos, away. And, so he only met really with qualified clients who were ready to do business with him. But again, like you say, not everybody's ready to do business at the time that you hit them with your seminar invitation. So you keep going back to them. And, it just, it really works. So, Sean, we have had a number of really successful advisors come through our workshops, and then they use this process to, build their business. So can you give us an example of one that kind of sticks out in your mind, one really successful advisor who has, taken this workshop or seminar idea and run with it and built his business?
Yeah, well, there are so many, but one example would be Peter Murphy out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Peter was a retired Navy commander and jet fighter pilot, and then he finished his, I think, 30-year career in the Pentagon as a budget analyst in the Secretary of Defense's office, and then I think he was like in his mid-50s or early 50s, and it's like, okay, I've still got my whole life in front of me. And he decided to become a financial advisor and moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and got hooked up with a small broker-dealer who was recommending that he buy full-page ads and put on a certain type of retirement presentation that it just fell totally flat on its face. The marketing that they gave Peter just wasn't working. So he was spending money inviting people to literally, it said like retirement planning. Retirement planning is a phrase that is so common now that it doesn't really draw people's attention. And he was really almost close to pulling the plug and deciding that this wasn't really the right thing for him when he met somebody who told him about your program, Savvy Social Security Planning. And someone suggested that, maybe it isn't talking about retirement planning, but it's something more specific about this whole tricky thing about Social Security. So he figured, okay, I don't have anything to lose. And he took a small ad out in one of the free newspapers in Santa Fe, and boom, it was about Social Security. And suddenly people were coming to his event when he was buying these bigger full-page ads on retirement, and nobody was coming. And so that was, that was a big eye-opening event for him. And so Peter read everything you had, became totally on fire, came to your workshops, and as a result of doing what he was doing in his community, he just repeated the process of putting small ads in this newspaper. The University of New Mexico's adult education program saw what he was doing, and they said, hey, why don't you teach this Social Security class and this Medicare class as part of our program, and we'll do the advertising for you and get people to come in. And so Peter went from doing these smaller one-off events to doing 4-hour events on a Saturday. He would do 2 hours on Social Security, like from 11 to 1, then they'd break for lunch, and then 2 hours on Medicare in the afternoon. And his business totally blew up. And he's just been doing that now, I think, on 7-8 years or more. And he's had, fabulous success because he was able to align his, his initial instinct with that broker dealer was, hey, the way to go is to educate people. That's correct. But the big topic was Social Security and Medicare that really changed things for him. So it has been, for Peter, he ended up writing a small book about Social Security that, again, he used to build credibility. And I think, there's a funny story that Peter has told me that I have repeated many, many times before. Of course, he puts on these classes and he invites people to come in for a one-on-one analysis, which I think now he charges, but in the beginning he didn't charge. He charges a small fee for it, but in the beginning he wasn't. And he had a couple that had come up from Albuquerque to his event in Santa Fe, and they came in for the one-on-one meeting, and it turned out that they had an advisor in Albuquerque, and Peter actually knew the advisor, and Peter knew he was a good guy and a good advisor, but he was fulfilling his analysis for this couple. And then at the end they said, okay, thank you very much. We want to go with you. And Peter's was happy to hear that, but also kind of feeling like, I know you have an advisor in Albuquerque. Do you mind me just asking, what was the problem? And the advisor had told them, and now, to be fair, this is going back almost a decade now, I guess, because I don't think many people would say this at this point in time. But this advisor told his clients that when it came to the questions of Social Security and Medicare, I wouldn't be able to offer you any advice. And here they are. It's like they're hooked up with the advisor. They're ready to go into retirement. You're our guy in retirement. We want you to be able to tell us, how is Social Security going to fit into our retirement income plan? How are we going to take this $500,000 nest egg that we have, plus Social Security, and convert it into something that's going to make us feel financially secure in retirement? And oh, by the way, we realize we're going to be having to pay for healthcare in retirement as well. So how does Medicare fit in there? And this guy, their advisor, saying, can't help you on that. They go and see Peter up in Santa Fe. And, well, the whole thing, they said, we're moving the money with you. And Peter got the reason for it. Sad but true. And so, there you go. We hear stories like that, all the time.
Great. Yeah, I love it. What about Mike Purcell in
Mike Purcell,
Chicago?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Now, Mike is totally different than Peter. Mike has a big team. He's got like 7 or 8 people on his team, 2 other financial advisors. And Mike has been doing the Ruth's Steakhouse dinner approach. So I mentioned before about going to a national vendor, who really knows the right, the right demographic and the right zip codes. And Mike has been doing this now for more than 10 years. His firm brings in 30 million plus per year in new AUM. They do, a dozen or more of these steakhouse events in and around the Chicago metropolitan area. Social Security is actually it is a homegrown presentation that Mike has developed over the years on retirement that includes an in-depth discussion of the importance of Social Security and Medicare. And he has, at the end of his presentation, he offers people the opportunity to come in for a free financial physical, is what he calls it, because he says, listen, I'm like a doctor, and there's no doctor who would ever diagnose anything for you without first, conducting an examination and tests, okay? And so my free financial physical is for you to come in and bring all the things that you just mentioned before, Elaine, the tax returns, the 401k statements, the other investment portfolios, the insurance stuff, but bring all that in because I need to know all this in order for me to make a good diagnosis of how best for you and or your spouse to move forward in retirement, claiming Social Security, signing up for Medicare, any of these other things. And so he offers this free financial physical, and that is literally people sign up for it at the end of their dinner at the Ruth Chris Steakhouse. And, it's just worked like gangbusters for him for years and years now. And guess what? When the pandemic hit, he wasn't left flat-footed. He had to experiment around for the first couple months to try and he wanted to figure out how can I replicate this Ruth Chris Steakhouse approach where everybody comes to the dinner live and in person, but couldn't do that during the pandemic. And so ultimately he discovered that he could offer people a $75 Ruth Chris Steakhouse gift certificate on the webinar. They just had to come on to the webinar, stay to the very end so that they could verify that they've heard the whole thing. And then, of course, they invite them in for the free financial physical stuff. But regardless of that, everybody got their $75, Ruth Chris, Steakhouse, a gift certificate. And he basically didn't miss a beat. He was out of business for 2 or 3 months until all this became solidified. And he was just, again, off to the races. And has had very successful years through the pandemic and has now transitioned back into doing them live, but he's not given up the webinar thing. That's what was really interesting that we've seen over the last couple of years is that out of necessity, people went to the webinars. And prior to the pandemic, when I'd put on a financial educator 2-day workshop, or I'd speak for an hour or so at our live in-person Social Security workshops. And every now and then somebody would say, what about putting on a webinar? And we were kind of like, you really needed, we said at the time, you really needed a decent email list to get enough people to come to your webinars on a regular basis for it to be successful. So now, then the webinar hit and people, pivoted, put on those webinar events and had great success. And now they're mostly doing hybrid stuff. They're still doing webinars because why wouldn't you? Because the truth of the matter is once you get comfortable doing it, it's so much easier than going to the steakhouse or going to the local library and figuring out parking and signage and lighting and the equipment and so on and so forth. Well, all that stuff is totally contained in your computer when you're doing a webinar. And once you get over the hump of feeling slightly technophobic about it for some advisors, once you get over that and become comfortable and you realize, hey, somebody on my team can be trained to be the co-host and they can handle most of the technical stuff, and I'm just going to come on and look into the camera, push the slides and do like I normally do. Well, they've had great success. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So, and just to remind people that anyone who comes to the workshop starting on Monday is also going to be part of become a member of our Savvy Social Security Planning Program. And as a member, you get access to our presentations. There are 6 PowerPoint presentations with complete word-for-word scripts. You could come in totally cold and just read from the script. There's a general one for baby boomers. There's one for couples. There's one for women. There are two shorter versions, one on Social Security basics, another one on what's new with Social Security. And then there's one for CPAs.
Yes.
And it allows you to offer one CPE credit for CPAs. And this is another whole avenue of building business, right, Sean? Through the centers of influence. And is there anything special about or different about that strategy, that approach? Maybe holding roundtable discussions, or, I always say that CPAs and attorneys all have baby boomer clients too, that are asking. Of course, they're doing different work with them than financial advisors are, but they're all concerned about Social Security. And let me tell you, attorneys need some education too. Some of them don't even know the rules about divorced spouse benefits, which they really should. Right. And so anyway, I just wanted to make that point, that
yes.
centers of influence.
And the key point there is, you mentioned the main presentation, which happens to hit. I mean, this is something that we've fine-tuned over the years, but somebody who comes, or if you present the main, what baby boomers need to know about Social Security, they're being exposed not only to the main issues of the claiming strategies and when to claim and how much money you may or may not be missing out on if you make a mistake, but then they're also exposed to the divorced spouse benefits, the survivor benefits, and a lot of the other issues that that really, in the end, leave a prospect sitting in the audience saying like, wow, I never realized that Social Security was so important and also so potentially complicated. An active listener and participant in that workshop is really primed to accept your offer to come in for a Social Security analysis. And we've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, it raises as many questions as it answers, really. Sure. But in a good way. I mean, it's informing people of, things that they didn't know, and gives the advisor the opportunity to really inform people.
Yeah. And, we've been doing a lot of discovery meeting research in the last couple of years. And just today we were doing session 1 of Chris Hallman's new workshop about transforming your discovery meeting process. One of the things we discuss in that program is using software in your first meeting. And a software can, so we have a broad definition of what software is. The Savvy Social Security Calculator Suite, of course, is one of the key things that, that falls under that heading. And what you're trying to achieve in that meeting is you're trying to achieve trust, likability, and competence, okay? And that you need to hit all 3 of those things in your first meeting to maximize your opportunity, to optimize the opportunity to convert the prospect into a client. And so on the competence front, it doesn't take much to learn how to use the calculators, but when you can sit down with a couple and either get their information in advance or do it there live in the meeting and run some analyses of their claiming strategies using the calculator suite, which produces a customized report that they can walk out of there and take home, which you can point to in the meeting. You really lock down the competence piece. I mean, you're just totally a slam dunk on the competence piece because they've been to your event, they've seen you present, they've been intrigued, they've come into your office or done it virtually. You've now used this software to conduct an analysis. You have fulfilled your promise of, hey, I will do this for anybody who comes in. And so then it's just the sort of trust and likability piece for you to really, totally solidify it. And hopefully you can pull that off as well. And of course, I think one of the important things to emphasize in your meetings with prospects is this whole issue of financial security, because research really shows that this is what's on people's mind. The idea of, being able to go into retirement feeling optimistic and proud of what they've achieved by making smart and responsible decisions throughout their lives and through retirement as well. And they're looking for an advisor who can help them as they move into retirement and to make a smart and responsible decision about how to claim Social Security. And, over the years, we've seen some unfortunate situations where there may be a husband and wife team. The husband is maybe Daddy Warbucks. He's made a lot of money, whatever. He thinks he knows everything. We got to claim at 60. I'm claiming at 62 because Social Security is a Ponzi scheme and it's not going to be there. And he claims at 62, and then fate strikes him a year or two later. He's not even around. And his poor wife steps into this severely reduced Social Security benefit when he didn't even need to do it. They had plenty of money. He could have waited longer and she'd had a better benefit. People never even think of Social Security in terms of it being a life insurance policy, because in some ways it is. It's annuity in some ways as well. It's really multifaceted. It is income insurance. And people just don't have this in their heads. And yet when you're able to, tell these kinds of stories and convey this in your meeting and show people, sometimes like you were mentioning, holding up the report, the analysis report in your workshop, whether it's virtual or in person, that this is a concrete thing. This is a deliverable that you will get if you come in and meet with me. All that stuff goes into, achieving that competence and trust and credibility that you're looking for in that first meeting that will hopefully be the basis and foundation for, a long relationship, a long and profitable relationship for both parties in retirement.
That's great. So just to wrap up, to remind people, the Savvy Social Security and Medicare Planning Workshop starts on December 5th on Monday. It will be via Zoom. It's 3 hours a day over 4 days, starts at 9 o'clock in the West, at noon in the East. The first 2 days, we will be covering Social Security in depth. And yes, there is 6 hours worth of material and more to talk about with Social Security. We'll be on day 3, we'll be talking about Medicare. And on day 4, we'll wrap up with healthcare expenses and history and financing of Social Security and Medicare. And then Sean will go into more detail on how to build your business with Social Security and Medicare planning. So thank you, everybody. Sean, did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, I thank you. And I think that it's, come to the workshop and be positioned to, listen, I think 2022 wasn't such a good year, was it? We've had lots of good years in the past, but last couple of years, up and down, whatever. This one, not so good at all, but I'm predicting a big year in 2023. And if you start out that year with some solid Social Security and Medicare expertise under your belt, and then you take the action to bring this information to your clients and to your community, you're looking at a good year 2023. So I hope we get to see people there next week.
Yep, hope to see you there. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day, and hope we see you next week.
Take care.